When it comes to property investing, we often hear about what to buy and where to buy, but rarely about why we buy. In this episode of Geared for Growth, Tom Haigh, a licensed buyer's agent with 17 years of experience in the property space, brings a fascinating new angle to that conversation, one that's deeply personal for many Australians. Tom's been seeing a powerful shift among investors. People aren't just investing to retire early or build wealth anymore. They're investing to help their kids, to give the next generation a fighting chance in an increasingly unaffordable housing market. In this episode, we unpack what's driving this new Bank of Mum and Dad 2.0, the kinds of strategies parents are using to build that legacy, and how this trend could reshape the future of property ownership in Australia. We'll also dive into how to approach investing with clarity and evidence, from understanding your investor type to identifying ripple suburbs and avoiding the traps of buying at the peak. So if you ever thought about how property can create security not just for you, but for your family's future, this one's for you. Let's dive in. Tom Haigh, thanks for joining me on Geared for Growth.
Mike, it is great to be with you today.
We are going to talk about a slightly different topic, which was really prompted by the why of people are buying. Now, we hear a lot of talk about the what to buy and the where to buy, but the why to buy is an interesting one. And you've kind of come back and said, I'm getting a very interesting why, and I think it'll be worthwhile unpacking that. Let's talk about that. What are some of the main reasons that people are wanting to invest in something when they're coming to you?
I guess the core theme that we've seen, and we've been working with investors for the last decade in this space, Mike, and originally it was, I want to build wealth. I want to retire early. I want to be in a position where I can make work optional and all those great things. And there's super valid reasons or why to be investing in property. But the most prominent emerging theme that I am seeing in my clients today is the desire to help their kids get into the property market. They are seeing what is unfolding in the Australian real estate landscape. Everybody who is in on the game, who owns real estate, thinks it's fantastic. Of course, the home's gone up or maybe doubled in the last decade, and doesn't that feel great? But then the other side of that is a realization, certainly for anyone who has kids, is, oh my gosh, this is going to be incredibly difficult for my kids to own a home in the future. And of course, one of our greatest needs in life is to have a roof over our heads, to have the security of a place to live, to sleep, to thrive, and ultimately for a lot of people, the ability to own their own home is stretching far out of reach. And certainly for our kids and the generation to come, it's a concern. We've seen the shift from the baby boomer generation where the house price relative to income might have been 3 times median house price. That is now edging on sort of 10 to 11 times. So basic maths, it's currently 3 times harder for someone to purchase a home than it was for the baby boomer generation. So I think those statistics and the realisation that things are stretching out of reach is probably driving that, Mike, in all reality. And as I said, it's been a really key theme that I've observed in recent years in clients. It's a deep concern.
Well, we've got the big 4 banks in Australia, and research has suggested that the 5th largest one is the Bank of Mum and Dad. So that's the traditional way that we've understood that parents would help their children is giving them some cash or a loan or going guarantor. But what are we talking about here? Like if they've secured a property themselves and they think it will be unachievable for their children, are they wanting to invest some of the equity that they've got through their ownership journey to get themselves into a greater financial position with the pure idea to kind of bequeath that to their children at the time that they need it? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, you're bang on, Mike. It's really having that investment vehicle outside of the family home that unlocks all of this. As the saying goes, put your own oxygen mask on first. And for a lot of people out there, it's really important because the ability to help your kids in the future is reliant on your financial standing. As you said, the core theme around the lending landscape at the moment for first home buyers is the guarantor loan arrangement, and or mum and dad, kicking in a bit of cash to help with the deposit. So that financial standing is great when it comes to a small amount that needs to be provided in, obviously as a cash gift, or potentially as additional security for the bank to provide that loan to the first home buyer. But ultimately, as we see this market continue to increase in value, that may not be a valid option in 10 years' time. So certainly for the investors that we are working with, their aspiration is to have an asset, a well-performing or an asset with great potential to perform well, that ideally is ticking away in the background over the next 10 years, along the way delivering, some, no doubt, some tax benefits and ideally appreciating to the point where that is a asset that can be drawn on to either obviously sold, and the proceeds of that sale being used as obviously a cash contribution, and or it may well be that the equity in that home can be leveraged for the same purposes of what we're seeing at the moment. So and all of that, ideally, mum and dad have got themselves into a position where there's a chunk of cash there that they can use to achieve that that aspiration of making work optional, of course.
This wasn't necessarily something that earlier generations did. You either bought a house or you didn't. Do you think we're witnessing a bit of a permanent cultural shift in how Aussies think about family wealth and property, or is this purely a reaction to those affordability pressures that you were talking about before?
I dare say it's a longer term trend, Mike, and the reality is in probably looking further afield to, say, Europe, where home ownership rates are obviously drastically different to what we have here in Australia. I think the cultural or the obsession around home ownership is something that's so prominent in Australia, and I guess it extends far beyond the personal financial standing and flows through to stability. At the end of the day, for anyone with kids, and I speak for myself, and I'm sure many would resonate, my ultimate goal in life is to provide my kids with a stable platform that they can use to thrive in whatever they choose to do. And the stability of home ownership is a key part of that. It extends far beyond obviously tenure and being able to reside in a nice location. It's the knowledge that you are going to have something that is yours that allows you to then look at life very differently. And I think for those generations, I know I've got a personal family story that's sort of evidence of just this. One side of my family, my father's side, we grew up in housing commission, and the instability of that arrangement was horrific in terms of the family unit and the relationships within it. The other side of my family was very different. There was a culture of home ownership, and that was a platform for everyone within that family and their outlook on life to obviously approach things a little bit differently. And it drastically affected the difference in the quality of the relationships. And again, I know this is probably getting a little bit philosophical for a podcast like this, Mike, but it's something I've seen with my own eyes. The impact of the stability of that or not is significant. So again, it's something I'm deeply passionate about, and I can see why many of the people that we work with today are putting that front of mind. They're putting that as a focus, and they're seeing that the challenges are real, the challenges are increasing. And I think back to your question, there is no doubt we'll continue to see a dwindling in home ownership rates. It's just a question of whether you want to be part of the solution for your family, and ultimately many share that aspiration.
So the people that are coming to you saying, I want to be able to do something to look after my kids, are they typically property investors themselves, or are they at that sort of older generation, maybe 50s and 60s, that have a bit of a nest egg, maybe one big rock in the jar, which is the family home where they've paid it off, or they've got a significant amount of equity, and they're kind of thinking, look, whether I'm sort of investing to have a nest egg to be able to give some money, or whether I'm investing to have something that I could maybe hand over to my children of a principal place of residence. Like, how would you define these people that are coming to you and having those conversations?
There's a really key theme, Mike, and it's in all reality that it's the 40s to 50s, right? So it's that stage of life. You've had the oh shit moment where you're going, okay, I've just turned 40. Often that's a trigger for thinking about the future a little bit more than perhaps it was in your 30s. And I think an outlook on life, or a point you reach where you go, okay, we've got our foundation set here. Like you said, we've got the family home. We might have a fair amount of equity as a result of having gotten into the market a decade or so ago. It's certainly the case for most people who bought 10 years ago. And it's ultimately realising that they need to do something outside of that. The mortgage, it exists. It's obviously a huge factor in the weekly household budget. It accounts for a huge chunk of obviously after-tax income, and it's a realisation that maybe the old way of going about this may not serve us, and certainly may not serve our kids. So I think that shift, and to your point on those over 60, their approach is entirely different. Ultimately, in a lot of those cases, they have paid off the home. There is no mortgage. They've got then the ability to redirect this surplus income to be able to assist, their kids, perhaps their grandkids at that point. But I think to the core of your question, they're not always investors. They haven't necessarily started on that journey. It's just having reached a point where there's a catalyst there. There's something deep within inside them that says, hey, we need to do something a little bit differently to what we're currently doing, because we have a concern that we're not going to reach the point that we want to be in 10 years' time, in 15 years' time, where, of course, the aspiration is to make work optional and to be able to help the kids. We may not have the plan to get there.
So let's hop into the shoes of one of those particular people. Let's say you might have two different case studies for someone in their 40s rather than their 60s, because there's a different sort of lending appetite once you get towards the end of your workforce. But what's the first port of call for you once you understand their serviceability and their nest egg and that sort of stuff? What do you see as the properties that are going to deliver that aim, which I presume is, capital growth is the big one. The cash flow has to sort of sit within certain parameters of comfortability and that sort of thing. But what are we describing here as a property?
Yeah, I guess it's in many respects, Mike, the great Australian dream. So it's the home with a land component, of course, that will lend itself to some appreciation over time. We're not making any more land, certainly in well-located suburbs within urban areas. And again, I think your point is critical. Without having done the planning work to actually have alignment in budget, in cash flow, and understanding the investor's appetite for the strategy. So that is the most important piece. So marrying up all of those. We have clients who are so unbelievably passive that we will buy a property for in Newcastle, very common location for us. We work with lots of investors in Sydney, further afield, and even locals here in Newcastle. But we will have many investors and clients who never see the property. That is their aspiration. Now, that is a very different approach to, say, someone who may have a trade background, have some building experience, have a desire to be hands-on in the future to add value to that property through a cosmetic or structural renovation. So it is ultimately about marrying up the budget, the cash flow requirements, and, of course, the longer-term aspirations as an investor. So what is the ideal best way for you? As we know, there are 100 different ways of going about this, and often we'll find that clients who come to us are quite confused. They've seen ads on social media about buying a ranch and turning it into a wedding venue. They've seen all these ads about NDIS housing and how fantastic this is going to be as an investment. They've seen ads about tiny homes and lifestyle properties, and we are in an era and an age where there is an abundance of great ideas out there, but often the most important thing is bring it back to that core understanding of the client. So what is your best way based on your budget, based on your cash flow requirements, and based on your ideals as an investor? So again, the other extreme for someone who may be passive and might be buying something that the outgoing homeowner is tastefully renovated, that will rent tomorrow with very little additional investment. might be, again, that value add investor who may be looking to add future value through a renovation, through a potential knockdown rebuild, or even a development. Now, as you can probably visualize from those far extremes, there's a spectrum of risk associated with this that we absolutely need to get right. There is little point in pursuing a knockdown rebuild property for a client who doesn't not have the time, the patience, or the risk appetite for taking on a project of that sort. So upfront, education is key. Look at the best options, but ultimately make sure that you're aligned in terms of the kind of investor you are, and really go into that eyes wide open. So from there, with an understanding of the investor type, we formulate a strategy, a purchase brief, and then we get out there and we get looking for properties. With that level of focus, it means that execution of that investment or that brief is a vastly reduced timeline to what many face, which is we're just going to look at all locations, all property types. We'll see when the right one comes up. Ultimately, they never see when the right one comes up because they don't really know what they're looking for. So bringing an element of focus to this is absolutely the best way to get the best possible outcome, but again, to make sure it is aligned with your investor type.
That's an interesting point, and something that I think I've talked about a lot is quite missing from the property investing conversation in Australia. And you've only got to look at some of the Facebook forums, for example, and you'll get something like, where's the best place to buy in Australia for $650 or less? There's no conversation or no background to say, like, I'm this age, I have this income, this is my investment horizon, this is my passive income goal, or this is how much I want to support my children with their deposit and that sort of stuff. Do you typically see that when people are coming to you, they're already focused on, like, oh, I hear like Hobart's going to boom, or I've got this idea that I could buy a 2-bedder and I can turn it into 3, and then the valuers have to use different comparables, and it's like this loophole. Are those the sorts of things that you have, or do you think that the education is a little bit better than it has been?
Yeah, I do see that as a theme, Mike, but I would say that more consistently it's the desire of the clients we work with to understand, or go through a process of education to look at the different options available to them and fully understand those options. At the end of the day, the client is the one behind the steering wheel. So what we do is bring an evidence base to those conversations to help them navigate this. It's not my decision to make. It's ultimately theirs. They're the ones that will make the ultimate call on what they want to be doing. And none of the things that I mentioned earlier, none of the different strategies or investment approaches are bad ways of going about that. And ultimately, the people that are putting this content out there on social media are doing it because it's a belief of theirs that it's a really good way of going out there and making some money in real estate. The number one thing and the most important thing is making sure that, again, there's a full understanding of what that investment requires from a capital outlay standpoint, from a due diligence standpoint, from an ongoing management standpoint. And then to the location piece, we are blessed today to have this abundance of evidence that we can draw upon to make an informed decision. We are seeing this theme in the stock market around evidence-based investments, and real estate should be no different. We have got so much quality data that we can draw on to make an informed decision about the socioeconomic profile of an area, about the number of competition, or the percentage of homes in an area that might be owned by other investors, which will mean we've got either a really high level or low level of competition when we're trying to rent what we are purchasing. So there are some really basic things that we can draw on there. Again, not to necessarily suggest that there is only one way going about this, but to really identify what is the best way and what is the best location when compared to one another.
And obviously you've been in the game for quite some time and have a highly credentialed career, even pre-buyer's agent in the property space. Of the people that you've you've come across, the people that have come to you and they have this idea of something to hand down, a bit of a legacy. How would you kind of characterize the people that have done it well? What types of moves have they made? What types of people are they? What types of investments have you seen are right for the people that have got some runs on the board?
I would say their growth. They've got a growth mindset, Mike. Undoubtedly, there's a vision of their future which is greater than where they stand today. These are people that invest in educating themselves. Obviously, listeners of your podcast certainly fit in that category. They are absorbing information and taking the most relevant bits of this to their circumstance, and ultimately, they are making moves to get their family into a really strong position in the future. I would say that 100% of the theme, certainly over time, has been a bias towards growth. And that's a product of often stage of life that our clients are in. Now, very different picture to say someone who is approaching retirement or in retirement whose bias is towards income, which is certainly relevant at that point in time. But many of our clients are self-employed. They are doing well within their business. They've had a tap on the shoulder in cases from an advisor of some sort saying, "Hey, look, it might be wise at this point to build an asset base to diversify your overall wealth." And typically they're looking for locations and assets with really great growth potential. Again, back to that point earlier, typically there's a fairly large land component, and in a lot of cases there's a desire to secure something that maybe in a decade's time they can add a bit of value to. But again, the common landing point is something that will rent relatively well, that's in a location prime for long-term capital growth because the fundamentals are there. There is a limited future supply of housing in that location. There is a high level of demand, which is often driven by the ability for these people to access high-paying employment across a diverse range of sectors. So that is no new news. I'm sure of that. The property investment fundamentals and basic economic principles will not change. But again, that is, I hope I've answered the question, but we have covered a bit of territory there, Mike. But yeah, that was, I'd say, the theme in what we see.
Yeah, no, it is, and it is interesting to observe, and I can almost sort of feel like you're kind of going, oh, this answer's maybe going to underwhelm because we're living in, as you say, a time where the advertising of the special things, the shortcuts, or here's the secrets to success are happening, but the fundamentals of investing well are quite boring and simple, right? Like, unfortunately, as a guest when I'm interviewing, as a host when I'm interviewing certain people, they almost kind of feel bad that they're like, okay, well, you need to buy something that has diversified employment drivers. Employment's really important. You don't want land supply coming out because that's just more competition. You don't want a place that has 75% of the occupants as rentals because that softens the demand for the rental housing. But these are fundamental tenets of investing, right, that have served people well for decades and decades. The Geared for Growth Property Investing podcast is presented by our business, MCG Quantity Surveyors. If you're an investor or a property professional looking to get the best tax depreciation deductions for yourself or your clients, please get in touch with us at mcgqs.com.au. It's our mission to help as many property investors as we can to maximise their claims and maximise their property education as well.
I couldn't agree more, Mike. It's the unsexy, boring stuff that does really well long term. It might be, the daggy home in the suburb. It's often not the glitzy, shiny new thing, in the so-called hotspot. It is, the homes that ultimately will serve a family and be really desirable long term because it's close to education, lifestyle amenity, and employment centres. Pretty boring stuff, but geez, it can deliver some great results.
Boring, unsexy, daggy. I mean, these are words that have been following my entire career. So you've come to the right show, mate.
You and I both.
When it comes to property right now, I mean, we've got all but three capital cities at the peak of the market. Two of them are close, with Canberra probably taking a little bit longer. Melbourne is on its way to heading back. It's really only Hobart that's still kind of suffering, though there might be some green shoots we're seeing in the data now. But we also have quite a lot of interest in property, especially since we sort of finished that rate cut, that rate increase cycle, and we've had a rate cut that's renewed some interest. The RBA meeting minutes are calling the policy settings a little bit restrictive, so we're kind of thinking and hoping that the end of 25 and the start of 26 we might get some cuts. It's a competitive landscape at the moment, so how do we as investors avoid overpaying when there's a fever pitch around a particular suburb or an area, or there's just a little bit more money floating around in the investment space? How do we kind of make sure that we're not buying something that's overvalued or at the peak of the local market?
It's a real challenge right now, and we spoke about this off air, Mike. We are seeing people act from a place of fear of missing out. There is no doubt about that. So, of course, there's an element of patience, but in a rising market, those people that are too patient may pay a significant opportunity cost. We had a number of clients through that COVID era that, rightly so, and were concerned about what was going to happen with the market. They sat on the sidelines and ultimately, in cases, paid an opportunity cost somewhere around $100,000 to buy the same thing, 12 or 18 months on. So no one's got the crystal ball with this. You can only, reach a level of comfort yourself based on doing your research and being really in tune with what's happening in the marketplace. There are other ways of going about this as well. If you are respectful and have dealings with local agents who understand what you're looking for, there is a really good chance you can get put on their pre-market or off-market property list. That is a great way right now to get into the market with a lower level of competition, as distinct from turning up to a Saturday open home with 60 or 70 groups going through and not actually being able to stand a chance of securing that home. So turn up, meet the agents, make sure that they understand what you're looking for. But of course, what all of this comes back to is having a clear understanding of what it is you're looking for in the first place. So if you're spread far and wide and it takes you 6 months longer than it should to get into the market, again, the opportunity cost is there. Now, the other part of that research will reveal pockets in the marketplace, maybe in surrounding suburbs, where you feel there is a price and a value imbalance. We are always looking for these locations. Now, what we are obviously trying to understand there, and for anyone who is in or understands or has been to Newcastle, they would know Merewether. Merewether is a great example of a blue chip market that is just a fantastic location. Is that affordable as an investor? Absolutely not. The median house prices are $2 million and north thereof, and so in the years around a situation like that, where we've got a market that is fundamentally out of reach for us as either a home buyer or an investor, what we then need to do is turn our attention to those suburbs that are primed for a ripple effect. Now, ultimately, at a point, the home buyer or the investor will determine that there is a disconnect between the price that they have to pay and the value that they will obviously have at the end of that. So a location that is a great example would be Charlestown in Newcastle, where the median house price is around $1 million. It's a hop, skip and a jump to Merewether. You can be at the Merewether bars in 3 or 4 minutes more than if you lived in Merewether and be at half the entry price. Now, that for me is a clear example of a ripple suburb that is benefiting from the spillover of wealth from a location that has become too far out of reach. So consider those periphery suburbs. Again, if you're feeling like your budget just will not buy you what you want in a marketplace, do your research. Start and turn your attention to those locations in and around where you want to be. We did this in Melbourne in 2010. My wife and I were trying to break into the market there. We thought Bayside and the Inner East were fantastic locations. very quickly I discovered that there was a disconnect between my budget and and what we were capable of achieving there. So the simple thing that I did was I started to then look at the suburbs around those more desirable locations that were going through a change. Where the spillover of wealth was started, where the young home buyers like ourselves were starting to invest in renovating the older homes, the tired, daggy nana homes, and the emergence of something you touched on earlier, the green shoots. There was evidence on the ground to support that. So I think at the end of the day, we are facing an unprecedented affordability challenge. There's no doubt about that. But there are ways and means that you as an investor or a home buyer can go about, I guess, identifying a competitive advantage to everyone else who's following the flock. So do your research, get clear on what's important to you, and then get out there on the ground and, again, build relationships where you can. Of course, if you need help in Newcastle, there's some great local buyers agents who will do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. But a buyer's agent is ultimately not for everyone. So if you're in that situation where you're doing it yourself, get out there, put in the hard work, but make sure up front you're clear on what you're looking for.
I love that. And what a way to finish. I mean, that's good, honest, old-fashioned, playing with a straight bat advice. But also, an innovative approach. I mean, you look at some of those median house price overlays. If we're looking at, say, statistical area threes, you can see the color changes and you're like, oh, like there's quite a lot of expensive houses and then there's this area in the middle. Now, there might be a reason for it. There might be something really objectionable there, but often there just isn't. Sometimes it's a local stigma, and that might stay there in a way that kind of the market doesn't really care about. It's like, yeah, I don't want to live in XYZ suburb because I've grown up thinking it's dodgy. But if it's 200K cheaper than next door, it's like, well, like I'm going to be the start of the change and the gentrification, right?
You're spot on, yeah, and I think that's where the getting out there on the ground is really important, because it's all well good to do your desktop research, but at the end of the day, there's a feel you can get for a market by being out there, rubbing shoulders with other buyers, and getting a feel for a local area that you just can't achieve online, and hence why many investors, particularly those who are investing at estate, many of our time poor clients who are in Sydney, as example, rely upon good local help from someone who understands the marketplace, not only from the point of view of the data and the prospects, but also whether there's a pocket of a suburb where you just do not buy for various reasons. So again, there's a lot of great insights that you can take online, and I think the thing that I touched on earlier, Mike, I'm the biggest fan of people putting new ideas out there in social media. I think it's fantastic that we're in this age where there are people that are putting out content that instill in people a belief that they can have, everything they want in life. The only caution with that is just making sure it suits you. So, again, boring stuff, planning, getting a strategy and doing your research, but ultimately, take inspiration from people out there that are having a real crack and showing you different ways of going about it.
Yeah, I agree. Like it's homework. The fun is the hot spotting and where are we going to buy and looking at this property. But unless you do that foundational work, you're not really setting yourself up for a success. So it does all start with education, and you've got quite a lot to offer in the education department with your podcast as well. So how do we find that?
So we are in places where you get your favourite podcasts, the Australian Property Show. We have been very consistent in that for the last couple of years. It's been a great project for us. It certainly feels like a labour of love at points in time, but I think it's one of those things, Mike, where I set out to deliver the kind of insights and have the kind of guests that I would like to listen to myself. And I'm still on a journey. I haven't. I'm certainly not the preeminent expert on this stuff in Australia. I still take great inspiration and learn a lot from the likes of Chris Gray, who's just a wonderful human in this space. And Chris is a guest on our show, and that's what we'll continue to do. I want to be able to get great insights to people out there who care about living a better life and providing for their family in the future. And we hope to continue to do that. It's a big commitment, but it's certainly worth it.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and a great show. And I agree, Chris, we've had a couple of times on the show as well. So thanks for the contribution to quality property discussions in that space. And thanks for your time today. It's been an awesome episode and really appreciate it, Tom.
Mike, thank you. I appreciate you having me on. Thanks so much.
Cheers.